Hey everyone, it's me, Lone. I hope you've been doing all right. Look, it's not an easy time for us Starfield fans. We are taking every little slight rumor, potential leak, and making videos or making posts about the game. We're hungry for news, clearly. But it seems like, maybe, potentially, we might not have to wait much longer on the game. There are a few people out there, again, people that are credible, that actually do have sources, that are hearing things. We're going to use the word rumor in this video because this stuff is definitely less concrete, but they are hearing certain rumors about how the Starfield Direct showcase might actually be announced very soon. We're going to be talking about this in today's video. If you enjoy it, please do like it. I would really appreciate it. Subscribe if you're new and consider joining my Discord. The link is in the description below. We're talking about all things Bethesda and Starfield, especially this year. Now let's get into it. First of all, we're going to start with Jess Gordon. You would have heard this man's name spoken in my videos recently a lot. He's the managing editor at Windows Central, someone that is very much known for actually having sources in the industry. As I've said many times before in the past, and I'll say it again, he has come out with things before the fact that have turned out to be true many times, especially when it comes to Xbox stuff. So recently, Jez responded to Skullsy, who's also a YouTuber like myself. Skullsy tweeted the following on Twitter, saying, Bethesda went from regular Starfield Constellation log updates to dev Q&A videos to literal complete silence for months. This is not how you build confidence in your community. While I don't think the game is getting delayed again, this is definitely far from a good sign. Now, Jess Gordon responded to that saying, patience. And then Skullsy went back saying, oh, I know, I'm willing to wait another 2 years if I have to. The marketing consistency is just off-putting in my opinion. But BGS has always been an anomaly when it comes to marketing. And then again, Jess Gordon responded saying, you won't have to wait that long. So this, in and of itself, this could just be Jez trolling, not actually saying much. Maybe he has some inside info. He's clearly being cheeky here. He is being tongue-in-cheek. He clearly knows something. What that is, I don't know. He's not the kind of guy that would just kind of poke the community for the fun of it. Clearly, this guy does know something, and I'm going to get to that in a second, so patience. Then second of all, we have the owner of VGC News, Andy Robinson. You might have heard about him. He is also a very credible journalist in the games industry. So he tweeted out the following, and this was notably after Jez Gordon's tweet. And I'll mention why I mentioned that in a second. But he says the following, I hear the announcement for the Starfield showcase is imminent. And then he followed up with a tweet a little bit later than that saying, as in soon. Now, on first reading of that, because this tweet came after the Jez Gordon tweet, one might assume that Andy Robinson was just saying that because he might have also seen Jez Gordon's response in response to Skullsy and then made some, speculation and some conclusions from that saying, well, I saw this one tweet from Jez, therefore I hear the Starfield showcase announcement is coming soon. However, I don't think you could really draw that from what Jez was saying. All Jez was saying is that you don't have to wait much longer. What Andy is saying is much more firm. It is much more clear in the statement that he's making, saying, I hear an actual announcement for the showcase is coming soon. I don't think someone in Andy's position would just make a throwaway statement like that, purely just based on what someone else in the games industry, Jez Gordon, is potentially implying in a tweet. To me, that doesn't make sense. And then we'll get to the crux of this video, if that wasn't already important enough. Jez and Randall Thor, again, in their Xbox 2 podcast, they did a bunch of speculation about Starfield, a bunch of speculation about the Starfield Direct and when this thing is actually going to be announced and also held. And this is what they roughly said. The link is in the description below if you want to listen to it for yourself. It's about 2 hours and 24 minutes into the podcast. But in there, they do mention Andy Robinson's tweet. And Jez specifically says that he's heard they might be announcing the Starfield Direct next week, at the time of this recording, mind you, which lines up with what he's heard previously. And as we know, Jez has heard certain things previously. In my last video on Starfield, I mentioned that he's potentially heard of a June release date for Starfield. Again, that's a rumor. Take that with a grain of salt. But he says that this particular bit about the Starfield showcase announcement coming next week is in line with everything that he's heard recently and previously. And then Rand and Jez both said that they've each heard from their own separate sources, it seems, about this, which is why Jez essentially said what he said to Scalzi on Twitter. So as I mentioned, he wasn't just saying that as a throwaway line just to kind of poke fun at the community and stir a little bit of, ruckus, right? He was saying it to Scalzi based on what he's heard from his own sources. And it seems like Rand has also heard certain things from his sources that link up with what Jez and also with what Andy has potentially been hearing, because they haven't spoken to Andy about this, but based on what he's tweeted, that's what their speculation is. So they go on to say that there is essentially no smoke without fire. If Jez is hearing about this from his sources, if Rand is hearing about it from his sources, and if Andy is potentially hearing about it from his sources, and they also assume that they probably don't have the same sources as each other. They mentioned that in the podcast. Jez and Rand probably don't have the same sources as Andy because he's in a slightly different position in the industry. So if that's all true, or if that's all what they've been told at least, their consensus is that yes, next week we might actually be getting an announcement for the Starfield Direct showcase. And whether that's Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, Rand did throw out some potential rough days for next week when this could actually happen, but that was more when he was speculating, right? So I'll go on and say that you need to treat this one as a rumor and not actually a leak. They very specifically use the word rumor, which is why I'm using it in the title. This one is less concrete. And remember what Jess Gordon said about how he doesn't like to report things on Windows Central unless he has hard evidence. And if he had a hard evidence, for sure he would be making an article on it because it would get him a hell of a lot of clicks onto the website, right? That's his job. That's what he's meant to do. So if he actually had the evidence, he would be making an article. So he's not making an article. Therefore, we need to treat this with much more of a grain of salt. We need to treat this as actually a rumor. Then Rand recalled a situation with the Xbox and Bethesda showcase, which took place in January, and how he was hearing about that thing in a very similar way to how he's hearing about the Starfield showcase potentially being announced next week. And then lo and behold, that showcase actually was announced, and it was announced to be taking place in January. That was one of the things that both Jez and also Rand were correct on. So Rand is essentially saying this feels very similar, right? And then he goes on to say that even back then, Rand heard that the Starfield showcase was going to be around March. Now we're actually talking about potentially when the showcase itself might be held, not just the announcement, but the actual showcase. When's that going to be held? If it actually is announced next week, then yeah, March sounds like a good bet, if not April. But then Rand specifically said he didn't take too much stock of that potential rumor at that time, as the info around Starfield he described was always very fluid. Plans seemed to change all the time. But then this week, conversation again started ramping up about the announcement potentially next week that the Starfield Direct is coming soon. And then they started speculating a little bit more as the podcast went on. No further spicy rumors or anything like that. Feel free to listen to what they were saying, again, linked in the description below. It seems like you're going to have to keep listening to their podcast. They always throw out something, here and there when it comes to their podcast. But Rand also said, and this again was his speculation, that he doesn't actually think Starfield is going to shadow drop like Hi-Fi Rush did. And I agree with that. Main reason why I agree with that, because you can't really do that when you have a collector's edition to sell. And I'll explain all that why in a second. So first of all, let's discuss all of this, because this is juicy. They are rumors again, but this is juicy. Let's discuss it. This is a good thing if it is true, because Bethesda has been radio silent, in my opinion, for a tad too long. Yes, they're working on the game. That is more important than anything else. But it was getting to the stage where they had been so radio silent that people were, understandably, starting to slightly worry and become concerned about the game, or at least that the date was going to be pushed back to the second half of this year, right? And I don't think those feelings are completely wrong to hold. I feel like when you don't hear from the Starfield Twitter account, they hadn't tweeted all this year until very recently about something completely different. When you don't hear from Bethesda Game Studios at all, or that Starfield, Twitter account at all, it's only natural to get some worries and concerns. So if the showcase is actually going to be announced next week, and we are actually getting the showcase sometime in March, maybe April, then that's a good thing. We're going to get more information about Starfield. That's obviously very exciting in and of itself, but it's good to know that the game is getting some progression potentially. So what does this potentially mean for the release date? I still think it's June. I said 6th of June. I'm sticking to that. I swear if the 6th of June is announced as the release date, I want to pull back my old video and I want to play it and be like, I was right. I could be wrong, but what Jess Gordon heard, again, rumor, but potentially sometime in June. Will they still release it on the same day as Diablo? Because that is also 6th of June. Maybe not. Maybe Todd does want to do that though and stick with that really nice release date. Who knows, but I still think if we are getting the Starfield showcase in March, then yeah, June sounds like a really nice time for the actual game to release. And again, I also agree that we're not going to get a shadow drop like Hi-Fi Rush. When you've got a collector's edition in particular, you know, that collector's edition takes time to ship out into stores. There's distribution at play here. The game is potentially being sold on a disc. We don't know either way, but I'm pretty sure that it will be. And if that's the case, it takes time for all that stuff to be distributed into storefronts across the world. So you can't, like with Hi-Fi Rush, because it was a digital game, yeah, you can shadow drop it and say you can play it right now because you download it from Steam or you download it from Game Pass. But when it comes to a game with an actual collector's edition and potentially a disc, no, it doesn't really work unless you've managed to secretly distribute this game behind the scenes to all these stores across the world and no one finds out about it. Then it's not really, I don't think it's actually possible. So yes, I agree that there's going to be some months build up until we actually get the game to come out after this showcase, whenever it takes place. So what are we actually going to get at the Starfield Direct? Number one, in my opinion, obviously we're going to get the release date. That is a no-brainer. Randall's even saying in his podcast, if we didn't get the release date, that would be a horrible, horrible move. And I completely agree. We need the release date. They can't come out and show us all this cool stuff and be like, the game's coming still first half of this year or even 2023. That would put people into an absolute spin. They need to come out with a release date. They know that. And that's probably why they've been taking so long with announcing the Starfield Direct and also hosting the Direct itself, because they want to make sure they are confident of this release date because they don't want to delay the game again, right? So I think obviously we're going to get a release date. Second of all, kind of like Fallout 4's presentation at E3 2015, I do think we're actually going to see the opening of Starfield. I think that's going to be really nice. I think we might see a little bit more of the character creation on top of what we've already seen at the, you know, showcase last year, at the presentation last year. And potentially we might get that stepping out moment that we always see in BGS games. Like Fallout 3 was the scenic overlook. Fallout 4 was coming out of Vault 111, right? We've always seen those stepping out moments, and I potentially think we are going to be getting that with Starfield. I think that would be very cool to include in the showcase. It's going to be a very cool visual if you're including it in a trailer that does have the release date for the game. Very cool moment. I think we'll actually get that. That's my strong hunch. And this is an obvious one, but we're going to see some more key features, probably ones that we haven't seen yet. They're going to have to come strong at this showcase, announce some new things that we haven't seen. So I think we might see one or two key features be announced and detailed in a detailed way. So, you know, we've seen the ship customization, for instance. So something similar to that, akin to that, right? Like Fallout 4, again, it was the base building. I think we might see something like that. Just one of the key selling points of the game, if you will. And then a bit more details about the plot and the premise of the game. Like, what is Starfield actually about? Some people are being very clever in terms of like guessing, you know, what the stepping out moment's going to be, what you're actually going to be in the game in terms of what your character is, roughly what the plot is going to be. I've seen some really cool speculation. So I think we're going to get some nice details about that very roughly. Obviously not anything in depth. I'm not going to give anything away, but I think they're going to say, this is what your character is. This is roughly what you're going to do. And potentially we might see a nice little quest or two. Again, like we saw last year, but maybe something with a little bit more substance, if you will. Even if it's just the opening or the intro of the game, that's still a quest line, the main quest line that they can still show off to some capacity. And then again, as I mentioned, the Collector's Edition, I think we'll actually get the reveal of the Collector's Edition, just like we saw it with Fallout 4 at E3 2015, like when it came to the Pip-Boy. I think we will see the reveal of the Collector's Edition. It'll be shown off, whatever it involves, it'll involve. And then yes, we're going to get some pre-order details, and like this is where you can pre-order from, and this is how much it's going to cost potentially. I think we're going to get a lot of that kind of stuff when it comes to the Collector's Edition of Starfield. So that's just my speculation, but let me know what you think about all these rumors, all these, if you want to call them leaks, but I think these things need to be treated as rumors because they're just discussions and little whispers, if you will, that Andy and Rand and Jez are hearing from people that they clearly trust. They wouldn't be putting their names out there if they didn't trust these people, at least to some extent. But they're just not that certain of it. That's why I don't think Andy's writing about it either on VGC, and that's definitely why Jez isn't writing about it on Windows Central. But let me know what you think in the comments below. This has been the Lone Vault Wanderer. Please take care of yourselves, and would you kindly keep fighting the good fight.